The cold in the Colorado high country in the winter of 1885 did not just settle over the mountains. It moved in like an occupying army, squeezing the life from every living thing that dared to linger above 6,000 feet. In the silver town of Silver Hollow, the air smelled like wood smoke, pine sap, and the quiet desperation that collects in places where men have found something worth killing over. Somewhere up on the ridge above the Calloway claim, a young widow was being told, for the third time that week, that she no longer owned the ground she stood on. He rode a gray roan mare that had crossed the Rockies more times than he could count, the animal's breath coming in long white plumes against the frozen air. The man in the saddle was somewhere in his early 30s, though the lines around his eyes told a longer story. Dark canvas duster, low-crowned hat that kept the pale winter sun off his face. His name was Boone Hale, and he had come up the pass looking for mine work. Just a quiet drifter moving through, or so the story went. What he didn't advertise, what the old men in 4 territories whispered about around dying fires, was that Boone Hale was the gunslinger they called the Winter Ghost. The man who had once, in a different Colorado winter, buried the father of the very same family now trying to squeeze Ruth Calloway off her silver claim. Now, before I tell you what happened in Silver Hollow that February, let me ask you something. If you rode in off that mountain pass and saw 3 armed men bullying a widow off the land her dead husband worked to the bone, would you keep riding, or would you stop? Most men tell themselves they'd stop, friend, until the moment actually comes and the snow is blowing sideways and those men are looking right at you. Subscribe and ride with us if stories about grit and frontier justice still mean something to you. Now let's go back to the day Boone Hale rode into Silver Hollow, and let me tell you what kind of week Ruth Calloway had already been having. The town sat wedged between 2 granite ridges in the high San Juan country, the kind of place where the sun only cleared the eastern ridge around 10 in the morning and was already behind the western one by 3 in the afternoon. One churned mud main street, a general store, a land office that doubled as a saloon, a telegraph shack nobody trusted, and maybe 30 structures in varying states of giving up. Most of the silver had been modest, enough to keep men digging, not enough to make any of them comfortable. But the Calloway seam was something else. Ruth's husband, James, had filed on that particular piece of high ground 2 years prior. He had a talent for reading rock. The vein he found ran deep and pure. In the autumn of 1884, 40 feet into a drift tunnel he'd driven by hand, James Calloway broke into ore so rich he sat down on the tunnel floor and wept. 2 weeks later, he was dead. The official story was a tunnel collapse. James was the most careful man with a drill and powder in the San Juans, and he didn't make the kind of mistake that collapses a tunnel. That truth hadn't surfaced yet, but it was getting close. Ruth was 23, brown hair in a practical braid, hands roughened from months of running the claim alone, eyes dark and steady, the eyes of a woman who has already lost the most important thing and decided that losing anything else is simply not going to happen. She had a son, Thomas, 4 years old. She worked the claim herself, filed her own papers, kept her own ledger. She had told the Mallory brothers, on 3 separate occasions, that their refiled deed was fraudulent, and she intended to prove it. The Mallory brothers were not accustomed to being told no by a young widow. Dent was the oldest, the one who did the talking. Long-limbed, pale, close-set eyes, the kind of calm that isn't calm at all, cruelty wearing patience like a coat. He'd been running freight contracts and crooked card games in the San Juans for 6 years. And he'd bought himself a friend at the county land office who made the Mallory paperwork look clean from the outside. Dent didn't shout or make open threats. He showed up, stood close, and said reasonable-sounding things that weren't reasonable at all. His talent was making the criminal feel inevitable. Cyrus was the middle brother, and the one who frightened people more, which, given Dent, is saying something. Built like a mined timber. Temper on a hair trigger with no safety. 2 killings on his record that everyone in the county knew about and nobody had managed to prove. He wore a Remington on each hip and had the habit of resting both hands on the grips when he talked to you, not drawing, just resting. The gesture said everything it needed to say. Then there was Lonnie. Barely 20, raw-boned, his face still working out what it wanted to be. He'd spent his whole young life trying to prove to his older brothers he wasn't the soft one, which made him the most unpredictable of the 3. Maybe the most dangerous, too, because he was still trying to earn something the other 2 had stopped caring about years ago. The morning Boone Hale rode past, the Mallorys had come to the Calloway claim for the 4th time. Ruth had her back to the hillside, standing in front of the added opening, and Dent was explaining in that patient voice of his that the refiled deed had cleared the county office, and the law was now on their side. "The law has a long ride up this mountain," Ruth said. "It does," Dent agreed pleasantly. "But so does winter, and winter's already here." Boone heard her voice before he caught her words. There's a quality to a woman's voice when she's holding her ground against people who've decided she doesn't have any ground left. It cuts through noise the way a hawk cry cuts through wind. He pulled the mare up on the track above the claim. Took in the 3 men, the way they were positioned around her, the way Lonnie had stopped moving. He told himself it wasn't his business. He had $4 and enough trouble of his own. Mine operations up above Silver Hollow, warm and fed by dark if he just kept going. The mare didn't move. She had opinions about situations like this. Boone turned her off the track. He rode down and stopped 20 feet from the group. Said nothing at first, just present in the way that changes the shape of a confrontation. Dent turned with those pale, patient eyes. Cyrus turned too, both hands drifting to the grips. "Something we can help you with, Drifter," Dent said. Boone looked past him at Ruth. She was watching with an expression he recognized. Not relief, not yet. A recalculation happening behind her eyes. "Let the girl be," Boone said. Quiet, not loud, not theatrical. The kind of quiet that has weight, the kind that thickens the air around it. Dent blinked once. Cyrus went still. Even Lonnie stopped moving. Dent found his smile first. "You're making a mistake, friend." "No," Boone said. "I'm making a statement. There's a difference. I'll only make it once." Cyrus stepped forward half a step. "You got 1 horse and a bedroll, old son. You want to count the guns against you here?" "I can count fine." Boone kept his eyes on Dent, the brain, the one deciding right now whether this was worth a complication. "This woman's deed predates yours by 22 months. Filing dates are public record. Whatever you've got at the county office, it didn't get there clean." Dent's smile went thin. "That's a serious accusation from a man nobody's seen before." "Not accusing anyone," Boone said. "Telling you to let the girl be. Once." The 3 brothers looked at each other. Lonnie had dropped his hat. Cyrus was doing the math, the angle of the sun, the draw distance, the question of whether this quiet drifter was more than he looked. Cyrus was good at that math. He was getting a sum he didn't like. Dent made the call, the way Dent always did. "We'll be back tomorrow," Dent said pleasantly to Ruth. "Think on it overnight. Man with a horse won't always be around." They rode back toward Silver Hollow. Lonnie looked back once with an expression that was reaching for contemptuous, and mostly just landed on worried. Boone watched them go. The mare snorted and stamped in the cold. Ruth stood in front of the adit for a moment. Then, "You could have gotten shot." "Could have," Boone agreed. "They'll come back." "I know it." "Then why'd you stop?" Boone thought about it. "Couldn't tell your horse to keep moving," he said. "Now, friend, before this story goes where it's going, if you're watching on a cold night with a fire going, a cup of something warm in your hand, subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. What time is it where you are? I read every one of those. There's a whole community of folks who ride along for these stories, and I'd love you to be part of it. Now, back to Silver Hollow." Ruth didn't ask his name and he didn't offer it. She was too practical for sentiment. She had a mind to secure, a broken axle pin, and 3 cords of wood to split before the next front came in. Boone worked alongside her in the late afternoon cold without much conversation, just useful in the quiet way that men with real experience tend to be. At dusk, over a fire and coffee in the one-room cabin, Ruth asked, "Who are you really?" "Boone Hale, coming down from Ouray, looking for work." "Uh-huh," she said. "When Cyrus Mallory looked at you this afternoon, he went still. I've watched Cyrus face down 3 different men who came up to argue with Dent. He never went still. He went still looking at you." Boone was quiet. The fire popped. Outside, the wind had started the way it does in the high country at night, not whistling, not howling, just pressing, like a hand flat on the door. "Cyrus has good instincts," he said finally. She watched him, then changed angles. "The deed they're using. James filed in April of '83. The Mallorys refiled in October of '84 after James was dead. The county recorder, man named Fitch, has been on their payroll since last spring. Their paper looks clean from the outside, but there's an original filing copy in Denver. I wrote them in November. No answer. I think Dent's had the replies intercepted." "Then we need that original filing," Boone said, "and we need to move before they do." He looked at the fire a long time. The flames had burned low, and in that amber light he looked like something carved rather than born, all plains and shadow, the stillness of a man whose body had long since stopped filing danger as remarkable. "My father came through this country in 1871, working cattle drives out of Texas. He ran into a man named Abel Mallory, Dent and Cyrus's father, north of Durango. Abel was squeezing 3 families off river access land using the same refiled paper his sons are using right now. My father tried to stop it." He paused. "He wasn't as careful as he should have been. Abel put him in the ground. I was 14. The fire popped. The wind pressed at the door. "I spent the next several years learning to be careful," Boone said. "In 1880, Abel tried the same play on a homesteading family outside of Telluride. I was there. He didn't say anything further about that. Ruth had the sense not to ask. She watched the fire for a while, putting it together. The old men up here," she said slowly, "the ones who've been in these mountains since the first placer days. They talk about a man. They call him the winter ghost. Say he moves through the high country in winter, and when trouble finds the wrong people, he—" She stopped. Boone looked at her. "That's you," she said. Not quite a question. "I don't put much stock in what people call me," he said. But yes, he picked up the cup. Dent and Cyrus grew up knowing their father didn't come home from Telluride. They've heard the stories. Cyrus recognized something today. He's not certain, but he's suspicious enough to be careful. A beat. That's good and bad for us both. Ruth pulled her knees up toward her chest. They killed James, she said. Flat and certain, the way a fact comes out when you've known it for months and never said it aloud. The tunnel collapse. James was the most careful man with a drill and powder I've ever known. He didn't make that mistake. No, he didn't. She stared into the fire. So what do we do? Two things. I go have a conversation with Fitch. I know how to make it go a certain way. And before they come back, we make this ground as unwelcoming as possible after dark. Ruth looked at the Winchester in the corner, James's rifle. She hadn't touched it since the funeral. I know how it works. Knowing how it works and holding steady when men are moving on you through the dark. Those aren't the same thing, Boone said. We start tomorrow, before light. The next 3 days, the Calloway claim got remade. It looked like an ordinary mine approach. It was a trap. Bloodless by design, Boone didn't want to kill anyone he didn't have to, but with no ambiguity about what it was built for. He walked the approaches in the pre-dawn dark each morning, reading the ground the way you read it when you've done this before. Not looking at what was there, but at what men moving at night would do. Where they'd funnel, where cover forced them to stop. What a false trail offered someone in a hurry. He strung cowbell tripwires through the timber at knee height on both forest approaches. He rigged a false creek trail ending in a concealed deadfall, 300 pounds of stripped pine on a single pin and a pull cord. He positioned Ruth's shooting line behind 3 stacked ore carts covering the main adit path and darkened the cabin windows so the south face looked empty. "You've done this before," Ruth said, watching him set the second tripwire in the early gray light of the third morning. "Once or twice," he said. She learned to shoot during those same 3 days. She had natural hand steadiness, the kind that comes from years of precision work in tight spaces, which running a small mine claim builds into a person whether they know it or not. First morning she was fighting the recoil, pulling left. Third morning she was putting rounds through a tin plate at 40 yards in the pre-dawn gray, the rifle coming level after each shot. "You're good at this," Boone said. "I'm good at everything I decide to be good at," Ruth said, and meant every word. On the 4th day, Boone rode alone into Silver Hollow and sat down across from Fitch, the county recorder. 2 documents on the desk, the original Calloway filing dates from the county ledger, and a letter addressed to the federal marshal in Ouray. One empty space where a third item wasn't yet sitting. "That letter goes to the marshal tomorrow morning," Boone said. "Unless what fills that third spot is your signed attestation that the original filing predates the Mallory refiling, and that you knew it." Fitch was a small man with the permanent, startled look of someone who'd spent years being afraid of the people he worked for. He opened his desk drawer. He'd kept a copy of the original Calloway filing for his own protection. Men in his position always keep something. Notarized. April 1883. James Calloway's signature and 2 living witnesses. Fitch wrote the attestation. His hand shook, but he wrote it. On the 5th night, the roan mare's head came up hard and fast in the hour before midnight. Boone was already out of the cabin, already in the timber above the main approach, in a hollow between 2 granite outcroppings where the cold had settled so deep his breath barely showed. He'd been careful about that, because in winter dark, a man's breath gives away his position at 40 feet. He counted the shapes moving through the pines below. 7, maybe 8. Coming up the south trail slow, weapons out. Dent Mallory wasn't among them. Dent sent men, he didn't come himself. But Cyrus was there, third in line, his bulk recognizable even in the dark. Lonnie just behind. They were on the false trail. Boone waited. The first 3 men hit the cowbell line and froze, and in that half second of startled silence, Boone was already moving along the ridge, silent in the snow, circling to the high ground above the added approach where the flanking group was pushing wide. 1 low whistle, 2 notes, a quail call. Inside the cabin, Ruth killed the lamp, picked up the Winchester, and moved behind the ore carts. The 3 on the false trail pushed forward. The deadfall hit them like a wall. 300 pounds of pine rolling down the hillside with a sound like something falling out of the sky. Nobody died. Logs positioned to scatter, not crush. But the noise split the group, and Cyrus's shout cracked through the dark and gave Boone his fix. He fired once from the ridge, into the snowpack 3 feet in front of the main cluster. The shot bounced off every granite face in the drainage and came back from 3 directions at once. The approach fell apart. 2 men ran left, hit the second cowbell line, and decided the dark was safer than wherever those shots were coming from. 2 more went to ground behind the mine wagon, which was the wrong place. Boone had known they'd do it, which was why the wagon was positioned to put anyone hiding there directly in Ruth's sight line. Lonnie was one of them. He came up from behind the wagon in a crouch, pistol up, trying to find a target, and found himself looking at a Winchester barrel from 8 feet away. Ruth said, "Don't." Lonnie froze. Whatever he saw in her face, it was enough. He set the pistol on the snow. Cyrus was still out there in the dark, and that was the problem. Boone had lost him in the confusion and circled wide trying to regain position, and they nearly walked into each other at the south side of the cabin, 15 feet apart, both moving through the same dark at the same moment. Cyrus went for his draw. He was fast, the real article, the kind that comes from years of practice and a cold willingness to follow through. Boone was faster. The Remington cleared leather. Boone's shot took it out of Cyrus's hand. Not the hand, the gun. The revolver spinning off into the snow in 2 pieces, Cyrus's knuckles bleeding where the frame caught them. Cyrus stood there staring at his empty hand with the look of a man whose most fundamental belief about himself just got corrected. "One warning," Boone said. "I gave it once. Now we're done." The remaining men came out of the dark, one by one, hands up. The whole thing had taken less than 4 minutes. In the morning, Dent Mallory received a copy of Fitch's attestation and the original Calloway filing through the Silver Hollow postmaster. The note ran 4 sentences. The original filing was now held in 3 places: the Ouray Marshal's office, the Denver Land Office, and a lawyer in Santa Fe whose name Dent didn't know. Fitch's attestation had been witnessed and notarized. The marshal would be in Silver Hollow in 10 days. The note suggested he used the time wisely. Dent left Silver Hollow 2 days later. Cyrus and Lonnie followed him south toward New Mexico, Cyrus nursing his hand and whatever he used to think of himself in equal measure. Fitch resigned by letter. A new county recorder was appointed in the spring, a woman who had her own reasons for keeping paperwork straight. Ruth Calloway's claim held. The silver vein proved out steadily through that spring and into the following year, not grand fortune rich, but solid and dependable. The kind that builds a life instead of just a story. She worked it carefully, the way James always meant to, with honest men beside her and no debt to anybody. The morning Boone prepared to ride north, Ruth walked out to where the mare was tied in the cold air and stood near the horse while he checked the cinch. "Where do you go?" she asked. "Back through Ouray. Got a conversation to finish with that marshal." The morning was still, the deep, clear stillness of the high country after a long freeze, when the whole world seems to have stopped to take a breath. "James would have wanted to thank you," she said. "James would have handled it himself," Boone said. "He had good instincts." "Yes," she said softly. "He did." He looked at her. "The Denver reply will come before the pass closes for spring. Keep it. Claims that look settled have a way of getting unsettled when new money comes looking. You know what to do now." "I know what to do now," she said. Steady, like something confirmed rather than promised. He swung up. The mare tossed her head, impatient for the road. "The man they call the Winter Ghost," Ruth said. "Is that what you want to be remembered as?" "I don't think much about being remembered," he said. She studied him in the thin morning light. "James would have liked you, Boone Hale." He tipped his hat. "Keep the fire burning, partner." He turned the mare up toward the pass and didn't look back. The hoofbeats on the frozen track faded to nothing, and then there was just the wind in the pines and the faint creak of the mine machinery starting its day. Silver Hollow going about the hard, ordinary business of surviving another mountain winter. Now, as an old man by this fire with more years behind me than I care to count, I think about Boone Hale and that February in the high San Juans. The Mallorys were never charged. Dent was too clever and too far gone by the time the marshal arrived. But they never came back to Silver Hollow. Some troubles you don't end. You move them along and hope the distance holds. Ruth Calloway worked that claim for 11 years, paid honest wages, kept honest books, and used some of the silver to build a schoolhouse in Silver Hollow that stood for 40 years and taught the children of miners and homesteaders and eventually their children's children. She never remarried, though she had offers. She had her son and her claim, and the proud freedom of a woman who has stood her ground and kept it. As for Boone Hale, the Winter Ghost, men like him don't collect destinations. He passed through a story when the story needed passing through, and then he went on. I heard his name once more, years later, in a town in Wyoming. Then I didn't hear it anymore. Maybe that's the right end for a man like that. Maybe the best thing you can say about a person is that they showed up when it mattered and didn't ask for anything back. The real darkness, friend, isn't the Dent Mallorys of the world. Those men have existed since the first town was built, and they'll keep on existing. The real darkness is when the people who could stop them decide it isn't their problem. When they keep riding past the sound of a woman's voice because the math on stopping doesn't pencil out. Boone Hale stopped because a gray roan mare had opinions. That's as good a reason as any I've ever heard. Before I close this fire out and let the night go quiet, this story, like all the stories I tell here, is a work of historical fiction, built on the bones of the real frontier, and told with the help of AI tools, in the spirit of the men and women who made that country. The history is in the feeling. The names are mine to give. If you've ridden this far with me tonight, thank you. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, what the weather's like, whether you'd have stopped or kept riding. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until our trails cross again, partner, keep your powder dry and your soul honest. Good night.